Here in Russia, the coronavirus pandemic started 1 year ago exactly to the date. Today, I'm giving you a big update on what's going on with the pandemic in Russia right now, how has Russia changed within this past year, and what are my biggest fears about the COVID-19. Moreover, I'll tell you why I am sick again. Let's go. If we're meeting for the first time, my name is Konstantin and welcome to Letters to King. We're living in today's Russia Explained by the insider you can trust. If you haven't done so, please subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any further updates from Mother Russia. And also, you'd be doing me a favor, because subscribing shows that you care and you find my content interesting and gives me energy to continue. First, let me give you a short summary of what has happened in the last year. 1 year ago, exactly to this date, we learned of the first case of the infected person here in Moscow. The coronavirus finally landed in Russia. Before, we had been joking a lot of how Russians are immune because Russians drink vodka and this disease is far away somewhere, China, and it's not gonna bother us and so forth. January, February, jokes were running rampant. In March, the jokes stopped. In mid-March, I went to do a regular food shopping. When I got into the food supermarket, I was absolutely shocked. I saw a bunch of people running around with shopping carts trying to grab everything they could get their hands on that could last. Things like pasta, buckwheat, porridges, salt, sugar, flour, canned meat, canned fish were just, they were just hoarding that stuff. Everyone was scared. We didn't know what was going on. We didn't know what was gonna happen. So I did two things. First, I grabbed the shopping cart and I started hoarding food myself. I figured I need at least 3 months supply of food for my family. My family consists of 5 people and we eat a lot. I went to different stores to get different things and we started running out of food in Russia. March 15th, I remember the date. The second thing I did, I grabbed my camera and I started filming. I made a video about how we were running out of food in Moscow. The link is right here, check it out. Fortunately, the food shortages lasted only for 3 days. 3 days after this whole craziness started, the suppliers and distributors stocked all food stores with such great quantities of food that it was unbelievable. Food was everywhere. So food hasn't been an issue since then. After we were all done with food, the fear descended. People were afraid, scared of this uncertainty. We, including myself, we didn't know what was to come. We didn't know what COVID-19 was all about. Gosh, wasn't even the name COVID-19. For the first time, I learned about its name, COVID-19, in early April. In March, it was the coronavirus, and some people called it the novel coronavirus. So we didn't know what that thing was. The rumors were rampant. They just, I recall those times, and my biggest fear and concern was that I was not in control of my life anymore, and I didn't know how to gain back this control and provide for the family and protect my family, because I simply didn't know what was to come. The coronavirus could have turned out like a zombie apocalypse with incredibly high lethal rate. Okay, we didn't know back then. COVID-19 ended up being not only the disease that was brought from China and affected many people's lives, but the event that has changed Russia tremendously. First of all, we went into a complete and strict lockdown in the months of April and May. I clearly remember the day that Mayor of Moscow announced there would be lockdown. It was Saturday evening, and he said that following Monday, Moscow would go into complete lockdown. For the first few days, no one really cared that much and no one enforced the lockdown. Cops were occupied with their own things, and army was just moving into Moscow. There were no roadblocks, no police. That Monday morning, the first day of lockdown, I did a little of reconnaissance. I jumped into my car and I drove to downtown Moscow, to the very center, drove around the Kremlin, and I could not believe what I was seeing. No people, no cars. Moscow was empty. It was like zombie apocalypse. It's not funny. I wouldn't say I was scared, but I didn't feel good about it. Folks, you should have seen that. This Moscow, imagine 24 million people, never sleeps. There are always cars, there are always traffic jams, there are always people on the streets. And all of a sudden, on Monday morning, no one. I was pretty, how do I say that? Concerned. There are about 24 million people live in Moscow. And if all of us lock down here for considerable amount of time, and God forbid we run out of food, then I didn't know what was gonna happen. That day I decided to evacuate my family into our second home in the south of Russia, where we have a house. I figured we have better chances of surviving in the house with thick walls and a lot of friends and family around than here in Moscow on the 24th floor of a high-rise tower. So we packed and we moved to Rostov, about 600 miles south of Moscow. Basically, we didn't even move. We fled. We fled in a rush. Next 2 months we spent in a complete lockdown in our house in Rostov. I was making videos, and I created the entire playlist called the Coronavirus Chronicles. The link is right here, check it out. You see, it was a really strange time. The scare for this disease was everywhere. We didn't talk about anything but COVID-19. News, TV, internet, people, conversations with friends, with relatives, my parents, coronavirus only. So months of April and May, we spent in a very strict, complete lockdown. I would get out of the house a couple times a week just to get my staples, food shopping done. That's it. We were really scared to get that disease because we didn't know what that was. Then a strange thing started happening. 2 months into the lockdown, this coronavirus craze, and by May I hadn't personally seen one single case of COVID-19. So I started questioning the whole thing. Like, guys, what's going on? I just heard about this disease. Like, oh, that person over there got it. Then there's another person over there. I started thinking it wasn't as serious as the media portrayed it to be. Then Vladimir Putin came out on May 12th, 2020 and addressed the nation saying, hey, we are winning over the coronavirus. The worst didn't happen. Everything is okay. Now we can get out. Now we leave quarantines, come back to work and so forth. A lot of companies were shut down, completely shut down. Shopping malls, restaurants, cafes, fast food, movie theaters, basically all non-essential companies in Russia didn't work. Then we started getting out more and everything kind of went back to normal and the summer was okay. The last quarantine remainings were lifted by middle of summer, and in August we returned to Moscow. Life was back to normal, business as usual. Comes late September and the mood changes by a great deal. All Russian official media starts ringing the bell, saying, hey, the COVID-19 is back, there's a second wave and it's much worse than the first one. Another quarantine, all companies in Moscow close the offices and, people work from home. Hey, I had heard that music before, packed everyone up, and we drove back to Rostov for the second quarantine, right in the beginning of October. And let me tell you, that's where shit hit the fan. because that's when coronavirus finally descended upon us. And I mean personally upon us. Next 3 months, October, November, and December, were the most horrific, the most graphical, and the most unusual months in my life. It all started when we drove to Rostov. We learned that coronavirus is like a fire all over that city of 1 million people. Moreover, our relatives, close relatives, were down with the coronavirus. My brother-in-law was near death. It was tough. It was tough. I was trying to stay away from infected people as much as I could, but I had to help him, and I went right inside of the COVID hospital. And I spoke to the doctors who were dressed like cosmonauts in this pandemic, epidemic suits, and I directly talked to people who had COVID-19. One woman died right in front of my eyes. It was so horrible. Fortunately, I was able to put my relative into the hospital, and I made a video where I explained everything in details, links right there. Fortunately, he got better and he checked out of the hospital 2 weeks later, healthy, well, more or less healthy. More COVID-19 cases followed. The worst one was my uncle had his arm amputated as a direct result of COVID-19. He had complications, thrombosis. A few relatives of mine were in really critical conditions. They had it really bad. So far, there are 26 people in my family who had COVID-19, including myself, my mom and dad, my wife. Fortunately, we had it more or less easy. Fortunately, we got over COVID-19 easily. I guess we were lucky. So 26 of immediate family members and 40 plus friends and colleagues of mine had COVID. So it seems like that in my circle, almost everyone has had COVID. So the months of October, November, December were really, really difficult. Healthcare in Rostov-on-Don was under huge pressure. Since January, things seem to have started getting better and better. Fewer cases are reported by the Russian official Russian government media. For example, at the peak time, we had 30,000+ people getting infected every day. Right now, a little over 10,000 people. I tend to believe this trend. I'm not sure about the numbers exactly, but the trend is there, I believe. There are fewer cases. The Russian vaccine, Vector 5, was introduced, and a lot of people have been vaccinated already. The effectiveness of this vaccine is under question. Some of my relatives and quite a few colleagues already got vaccinated. Personally, I'm not going to get vaccinated. There are questions that I ask about this vaccine. I've talked to numerous doctors, and you see, Russian doctors cannot tell me whether I should not or should vaccinate myself because it's against the law. They're afraid, but they usually tell me something like this. I've spoken to quite a few friends of mine who are medical doctors, and their response about vaccination against COVID-19 was very universal, and it goes something like this. Most of them said, well, have the person or the people who designed and manufactured this vaccine vaccinate themselves first and their kids, and only then I'll go and vaccinate myself. No, they're not going to do that. But I personally know quite a few people who have done that, and they're fine. So this is March, 1 year exactly after this whole craziness started. And what are we having right now? Life in Russia is back to normal. The cases are fewer by the day. People are not afraid of coronavirus anymore. We don't even talk about this thing. If 1 year ago that's all we talked about, nowadays it's barely mentioned here and there. It has become a part of our life, very unpleasant one, but not the biggest and not the scariest part of our lives. We don't have any more restrictions left, except for we must wear masks everywhere in the public places, such as public transportation, the stores, but it's more of a formality because people usually don't wear masks only when they get, for example, if they're at the store, only when they get at the checkout, the cashier asks to put the mask on. You know, we put the masks on, pay, take them off, and go our way. That's pretty much what's going on. So that's just a show. But this restriction is here to stay for a long, long time. That's my humble opinion. Because of one single reason. The mask manufacturers making lots of money right now. And they want to continue making money. Therefore, my bet is the mask restriction is here for perhaps years, unfortunately. Are there any fears about COVID-19 left? Oh yes, there are, and there are plenty. But these fears, my personal fears, are not about the health, the medical part of the COVID-19. Far from it. You see, what's happened in Russia for the last year is this: our medical system was put under tremendous stress. It's like a stress test. It was unlike anything we had ever seen before. And Russian medical system didn't fall apart. It's still there. Doctors are still helping people. Things are getting better. If, for example, in October and November, it took 10 days for an emergency ambulance to come to a person to help with COVID, 10 days. There were so many people, so few ambulances, and they were so backed up, people had to wait weeks. Right now it takes 1 day, basically within 1 day an emergency ambulance comes. And in Moscow, 30 minutes. There are beds in the hospitals, meaning if you really need oxygen, if you really need medical attention, that they will take you to the hospital. You will get it for free, okay? So our system is still in place, it's still functioning, people are still working, doctors are there, and the doctors know a great deal more about the COVID-19 than they knew before, a year ago, you know. That's good. People have much better chances of surviving this terrible disease than 12 months ago. So coronavirus itself is not a concern, but there are different concerns. For example, a great concern is the state of economy. What's going to happen with Russian economy and the world economy? 12 months ago, I was invited to one of Russian YouTube channels to give an interview and forecast on the state of American economy and things that would follow soon. And I predicted a disaster, a big crash, based on that fact that Americans are extremely overcredited, and a mere loss of 4-week income would create a financial disaster for a lot of American families. They wouldn't be able to pay their credit card bills, their mortgages, their rents, you know. That hasn't happened because the American government has flooded the economy with money, with the stimulus checks that basically helped Americans. They borrowed money and helped Americans to get by during these difficult times with that borrowed money. Russian economy hasn't crashed either. I mean, it has shrunk by a great deal, but it hasn't crashed. And that's a huge surprise to me because our economy was shut down for 2 months. I thought that we would not survive. Okay, I thought something bad was going to happen. But, you know, we're still in business. Companies still open. Everything is working. I mean, a lot of companies went out of business, but it's not catastrophic event, you know. Probably we are in the beginning of a long recession that would last a few years, but I think we will prevail. My biggest and strongest concern is the usurpation of power. You see, the governments throughout the world, they have tasted this power of isolating people, putting lockdowns, controlling people. If before the pandemic, that's something we could read in the fiction books, science fiction books. In the past year, we have seen so many things from fiction books happening in real life that's really, really scary. I mean, how can you put entire country of Russia under complete lockdown? Yes, it turned out to be very possible and very easy. It means that in the next big event, God forbid something happens, there are procedures that can control people and keep them in one place even more effectively. Now the government already has experience. It made some mistakes and it has learned from the mistakes. And I'm not only talking about Russian government. Throughout Europe, America, Canada, pretty much everywhere, same thing happening. What I am most afraid of, even if not any such large, huge, catastrophic events really happen in the future, that the governments will create one. To summarize, I believe that the coronavirus is either man-made or natural pandemic. We're gonna be fine. I mean, how many people died in the world? Couple million? How many people died of diabetes? How many people died of obesity, of coronavascular diseases, of AIDS? Compared to the numbers with COVID-19, compare how many people die in the car accidents every year. Coronavirus is peanuts, okay? But the way they control us, the way they influence our minds, they brainwash us, that's the biggest concern, okay? And that's the biggest fears that we had before they materialized. The governments actually saw and they got the taste of blood, how easy and how efficient to control us. I promise to tell you at the end why I'm sick for the second time. Well, I hope it's not the coronavirus this time. Just a regular flu. My throat hurts. You know, I had headache, running nose, high fever for a couple days, but I'm getting better. I hope it's not the coronavirus. And by the way, one of my relatives had coronavirus twice. Thank you for watching this update on the coronavirus. Please stay healthy, stay safe, and I'll see you next time.